A new master lease for the Mauna Kea Science Reserve was discussed at a public open house in Hilo Thursday night, part of an environmental impact statement preparation notice process.
We've just started the process. It started, actually, I brought a prop with an EIS preparation notice. So this was January 8th, official publication in Office of Environmental Quality Control Bulletin. There's a 30-day public review period. And this document tries to lay out the alternatives that we've been able to think about that should be considered by the Board of Land and Natural Resources when it's considering the request for a new master lease for Mauna Kea.
The University of Hawaii at Hilo, charged by the Department of Land and Natural Resources to manage the 11,288-acre Mauna Kea Science Reserve, wants to extend their lease of the summit area beyond December 31st, 2033, when the agreement expires.
The federal process for environmental impact statements has this very formal thing. The scoping in the state process is this EIS prep notice. And then these meetings are really, they're not required. They're extra ways of sort of making sure that we have as many avenues for feedback as early as possible. Because the worst thing is you get down the draft EIS stage, you've done all the work, you've taken all the time, and then somebody says, well, you know, you totally missed it. Do people have ideas about alternatives that we haven't thought about that we should put into the EIS? And do they have ideas about potential impacts? Because we've tried to highlight what we're going to look at in here. Do they have ideas they think we're missing something? So we'll take all of the feedback that we get at the end of this consultation period. So that's written comments on this document, comments that get dropped in the box over there, something somebody sends in after this meeting, and we'll sort of go back and say, do we need to think about other impacts that we don't have in here? Do we need to think about alternatives we don't have in here? And then we'll sort of set out full speed on doing the draft EIS. And so if nobody comes up with things we totally haven't thought about, then probably optimistically end of third quarter of this year, we would have a draft environmental impact statement that would go out. It would be much thicker than this. It would include all of the written comments that we've gotten on this and things that people drop in the boxes. We take all of that feedback, we develop a final EIS, tries to address everything that everybody has said. That goes in, and if it's acceptable, either the governor or his designee, in this case it would probably be the head of DLNR, would say, I approve of this, and that becomes then an informational document which gets then used by the board when it decides whether or not to issue a new master lease, and what that new master lease might look like.
The master lease would include the lease for the 19-acre Halepohaku mid-level facility, as well as the easement for the Mauna Kea access road between the two areas. Officials were on hand to explain the alternatives being examined.
We have three that are in there now. One is the no action alternative, which is a requirement of state law. And we've made that one first, actually. Usually people tack that on in the end. We didn't think that was a good idea. So that's our first alternative. If that happens, then the existing lease runs its course. The existing facilities are gradually decommissioned. Everybody has to be out of there by the end of the existing master lease, which is the end of 2033. Most things would go before that, but everybody has to be gone by then. The second alternative we're looking at is a new master lease, which would be for 65 years, which would be for the same area that the university is currently leasing. So 11,000 plus acres. They would continue to management in accordance with a comprehensive management plan, which has been adopted, which has sub-plans, including what happens at the end of all of this plan, as well as cultural resource management, natural resource management. And then the third alternative, because some people have said, well, we don't think the university does a very good job of managing it. And so in that one, the university's area contracts a huge amount, down from its existing over 11,000 acres to less than 1,000 acres, so about 90% less. The land that they no longer manage goes back and is managed by DLNR. We've talked to DLNR about, well, okay, what would you do with that area? And they have said that, well, it would really go back into the forest reserve, in which we would do in it what we do with the rest of the forest reserve, which is a fairly passive management scheme. The adjacent areas, the natural area reserve, that would continue. And so those are the three alternatives that we're going to be looking at in depth. And there's been so much work that's been done up there already in putting together the comprehensive management plan, natural resource management plan, demobilization plans, that we are in the really wonderful situation of not having to do too much of that.
The master lease will impact future science observatory subleases, which is a controversial topic for many. Many stakeholders opposed to the university lease boycotted the different open house sessions on Oahu, in Waimea, and in Hilo.
Basically, the short form is we're boycotting this process. Not because we're opposed to the environmental review process. We actually support that, and we feel environmental review processes such as doing environmental impact statements are a key to our Aloha Aina movement in general. But we're boycotting this process because, quite frankly, it's just a nuisance process, and it's sort of like to harass the people. It's not really necessary. And the reason why is because, first, we're in court. And what that means is we're challenging the permit and all of the things relating to Mauna Kea and astronomy on Mauna Kea altogether. We're in the Intermediate Court of Appeals on one situation, and in our other case, we're in the Third Circuit right now. So when these processes are going on, the university should not be moving ahead with other processes. And so we're boycotting it because it seems more like a fake process to us rather than a real process. And also the second important reason is that the TMT, which is a 30-meter telescope, which they're trying to get the lease for, the 65-year lease is what they're asking, it can't really be built if they don't get that lease. But what's missing here is that the environmental impact of the TMT has already been assessed. And that impact, clearly, they stated in their own documents, is 30 years of astronomy development has resulted in adverse, significant, and substantial impact to the cultural and natural resources. So what that means is that BLNR should have said no, but instead they said yes and gave them a permit, and that's why we're in court. So we're trying to keep them honest here and trying to keep them law-abiding. And one way to do that, is just to boycott the process, because if the people are not engaged in this process, if they're not doing it in good faith and the people resist, they can't really do it legitimately. So that's why we're doing it.